The Jedi of the High Republic and the Jedi of the Clone Wars era stand as representations of two vastly different epochs in the history of the galaxy. Their philosophies, practices, and roles within the galaxy provide a fascinating contrast that illuminates how the Jedi Order evolves in response to external pressures, political dynamics, and the state of the Force itself. The High Republic era, characterized by a flourishing and optimistic galactic republic, offers a vision of the Jedi at their peak, functioning as true peacekeepers and explorers of the galaxy. In contrast, the Jedi of the Clone Wars era are deeply entangled in political conflicts and warfare, their principles compromised by the burdens of leadership and allegiance to a republic in decline. The High Republic Jedi exist in a time of relative peace and stability during an era of galactic expansion and unity. The Jedi are a beacon of hope, revered and trusted by the galaxy's inhabitants. Their role during this time is deeply intertwined with their spiritual connection to the Force, which they view not merely as a tool, but as a guide and a partner in their endeavors. Their mission is not limited to settling disputes or combating threats, but extends to exploration, understanding, and fostering harmony across the galaxy. The Jedi of the High Republic believe in a symbiotic relationship with the Force, reflecting a philosophy that is deeply contemplative and rooted in the concept of balance. They are guardians of peace and knowledge, often seeking to prevent conflicts before they arise rather than merely reacting to them. In contrast, the Jedi of the Clone Wars are shaped by a galaxy in turmoil. The Clone Wars era represents a time of strife, where the Jedi Order finds itself at the center of an all-consuming galactic conflict. This transformation is not merely situational but existential. The Jedi, once noble guardians of peace, become generals and soldiers. Their actions are dictated by the Republic's demands rather than the Force's will. The Jedi of this era are forced to compromise their spiritual practices and ideals, resulting in an order that is more pragmatic and militarized. They struggle with the moral implications of their role in the war, often questioning whether their involvement aligns with their fundamental purpose as protectors of peace. The visual and thematic representation of the High Republic Jedi reflects their ideals. Their attire, often adorned with gold and white, symbolizes their connection to the light side of the Force and their role as ambassadors of peace and unity. Lightsabers, while still tools for defense, are also seen as extensions of their individuality and connection to the Force. The designs of their weapons often reflect personal creativity and craftsmanship, a stark contrast to the utilitarian and standardized appearance of the Clone Wars-era Jedi gear. The Jedi temples of the High Republic, including the Grand Temple on Coruscant, serve as hubs of learning and contemplation, reflecting their dedication to knowledge and harmony. The Jedi of the Clone Wars era, however, present a more somber image. Their robes are practical and subdued, designed for functionality in the midst of warfare. Lightsabers, while still personal, often lack the flourish and individuality of the High Republic era, reflecting the utilitarian mindset of Jedi embroiled in battle. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant during this time is a fortress, its serene corridors overshadowed by the grim realities of war and the ever-looming presence of the Republic's military machinery. The transition from spiritual sanctuaries to war rooms underscores the drastic shift in the Order's priorities and identity. One of the defining traits of the High Republic Jedi is their collaborative spirit. They work closely with the Republic, but their autonomy remains intact. The Jedi are not beholden to political agendas or bureaucratic machinations. Instead, they function as independent arbiters and mediators, their authority stemming from their integrity and connection to the Force rather than political mandate. They approach challenges with a sense of optimism and curiosity, embodying a proactive philosophy that seeks to understand and address the root causes of conflict. This approach allows them to maintain their role as peacekeepers without becoming enmeshed in the Republic's political intricacies. In contrast, the Clone Wars-era Jedi are deeply entangled with the Republic's politics and military. The creation of the Grand Army of the Republic, with Jedi serving as generals, represents a fundamental shift in their role. They are no longer independent mediators, but active participants in the war. Their decisions are influenced by political considerations, and their actions often serve the Republic's interests rather than the broader ideals of peace and justice. This loss of autonomy and the moral compromises it entails lead to a growing disillusionment within the Order, as well as a weakening of their spiritual connection to the Force. The Sith, operating in the shadows, exploit these vulnerabilities, orchestrating the downfall of the Jedi and the Republic itself. The High Republic Jedi's relationship with the Force is deeply spiritual and personal. They embrace the Force in its entirety, seeing it as a living entity that connects all things. This philosophy allows for diverse interpretations and practices within the Order, fostering an environment of mutual respect and understanding. The Jedi of this era are not bound by dogma but are encouraged to explore their unique connections to the Force. This diversity is reflected in their approach to challenges, which often emphasizes compassion, creativity, and collaboration. The Jedi of the Clone Wars era, however, experience a strained relationship with the Force. Their immersion in conflict and the moral ambiguities of war create a disconnect, making it harder for them to hear the Force's guidance. The shift from peacekeepers to warriors disrupts their spiritual practices, leading to a growing reliance on tactical and pragmatic thinking. This divergence from their spiritual roots contributes to their downfall, as they become vulnerable to the manipulations of the Sith and the dark side. The High Republic Jedi's role as explorers and diplomats also sets them apart. They venture into uncharted territories, establishing contact with distant worlds and cultures, and fostering unity through understanding and cooperation. Their missions are often driven by a sense of wonder and a desire to expand the galaxy's collective knowledge. This emphasis on exploration and diplomacy reflects their belief in the potential for harmony and growth within the galaxy. The Clone Wars-era Jedi, in contrast, are consumed by the demands of war. Their missions are dictated by military objectives rather than a pursuit of knowledge or understanding. Diplomacy takes a backseat to strategy, and exploration is replaced by campaigns and battles. The Jedi of this era are defined by their roles as commanders and soldiers, a far cry from the explorers and mediators of the High Republic. The contrasting leadership styles within the Jedi Order further illustrate the differences between these two eras. The High Republic Jedi Council operates with a spirit of collaboration and inclusivity, valuing diverse perspectives and encouraging open dialogue. Their leadership reflects the Order's ideals, emphasizing wisdom, compassion, and a commitment to the greater good. The Jedi Masters of this era are mentors and guides, nurturing the growth and individuality of their students. The Jedi Council of the Clone Wars era, however, is more insular and rigid. Their decisions are often influenced by political considerations, and their leadership style is marked by a sense of urgency and pragmatism. The pressures of war and the growing influence of the Sith create an atmosphere of tension and mistrust, leading to a more hierarchical and authoritarian dynamic within the Order. The Jedi Masters of this era, while still committed to their duties, struggle to reconcile their roles as warriors and spiritual leaders. The fall of the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars era can be traced back to the compromises and contradictions that emerged during this time. Their involvement in the war, their entanglement with politics, and their disconnect from the Force create a perfect storm that allows the Sith to exploit their vulnerabilities. The Jedi of the High Republic, unburdened by these conflicts, embody a purity of purpose and a spiritual connection that serves as a stark contrast to their future counterparts. The story of the High Republic and Clone Wars era Jedi is a tale of two orders, each shaped by the circumstances of their time. The High Republic Jedi represent an idealistic vision of what the Order can be, a symbol of hope and harmony in a galaxy at peace. The Clone Wars era Jedi, in contrast, are a reflection of a galaxy in turmoil, their principles and purpose eroded by the demands of war and politics. Together, these two eras provide a rich tapestry that explores the complexities of the Jedi Order and its role in the Star Wars universe. The High Republic Jedi offer a glimpse of what the Order might have been in a galaxy unmarred by war. They functioned as an extension of the Force's harmony, shaping their actions based on its natural ebb and flow. The Jedi's role as peacekeepers was intrinsic to their identity, and they carried their responsibilities with a dignity that extended far beyond political alignment. This era represents a true golden age for the Jedi, where their autonomy and spiritual integrity were unchallenged and their connection to the Force unbroken. The High Republic was an era defined by its optimism and innovation. The Jedi Order of this time embodied these values, embracing an ethos that celebrated individuality and exploration. The Order encouraged diversity in how Jedi connected with the Force, resulting in a more inclusive and expansive understanding of their role in the galaxy. While the Jedi shared a common mission to uphold peace and justice, they were not constrained by rigid dogma. This allowed for greater creativity in their approaches to problem solving and fostered a sense of unity rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. The exploration of the Outer Rim territories was a hallmark of the High Republic era. The Jedi ventured into uncharted regions, acting as trailblazers and diplomats who sought to expand the Republic's influence while respecting the autonomy of the worlds they encountered. They worked hand in hand with Republic pioneers and navigators, ensuring that expansion efforts were harmonious rather than exploitative. This collaborative spirit extended to their relationship with the local populations, as the Jedi prioritized dialogue and understanding over domination. Their efforts were guided by the Force, which they perceived as a compass pointing them toward balance and growth. This stands in stark contrast to the Jedi of the Clone Wars, who found themselves mired in the complexities of galactic politics. By this time, the Republic had transformed into a bureaucratic machine riddled with corruption and inefficiency. The Jedi, despite their best intentions, were drawn into its orbit and became instruments of the Senate's will. Their position as generals in the Grand Army of the Republic was emblematic of this shift. The Clone Wars did not allow for the exploration or philosophical pursuits that defined the High Republic. Instead, the Jedi were consumed by the immediate demands of conflict and survival. The Clone Wars-era Jedi's loss of autonomy is one of the most profound shifts between these two periods. In the High Republic, the Jedi worked alongside the Republic as equals, their actions guided by the Force rather than political expediency. In the Clone Wars, however, the Jedi became subordinate to the Republic's military hierarchy. Their council meetings were often dominated by strategic discussions and military planning, leaving little room for the philosophical reflection that once defined their order. This subordination eroded the Jedi's ability to act as impartial peacekeepers, binding them to the political and military outcomes of the war. The strain on the Jedi's relationship with the Force during the Clone Wars is another key difference. The High Republic Jedi reveled in their spiritual connection, using it as a wellspring of insight and guidance. They meditated not only to seek clarity but also to deepen their understanding of the Force's will. This connection enabled them to approach their duties with a sense of purpose and alignment that transcended the physical realm. In the Clone Wars era, however, the constant demands of battle and the moral compromises inherent in leading armies created a rift between the Jedi and the Force. Their reliance on tactical thinking and military strategy often came at the expense of spiritual clarity, leaving them vulnerable to the dark side's influence. The High Republic Jedi were also more attuned to the galaxy's diverse cultures and needs. They served as ambassadors of the Republic's values, but they did so with respect for the sovereignty and traditions of the worlds they visited. This approach fostered trust and cooperation, as the Jedi prioritized dialogue and empathy over coercion. Their actions were driven by a genuine desire to create harmony and understanding, rather than to impose their ideals. This contrasts sharply with the Jedi of the Clone Wars, whose involvement in the war often necessitated a more heavy-handed approach. Their presence on many worlds was viewed with suspicion or resentment, as they were seen as enforcers of the Republic's will rather than impartial peacekeepers. The fall of the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars can be understood as the culmination of these compromises. The Sith, having operated in the shadows for centuries, capitalized on the Jedi's vulnerabilities, orchestrating a war that would lead to their destruction. The High Republic Jedi, by contrast, were less susceptible to such manipulation because they remained true to their principles and were not burdened by the moral compromises of warfare. The Sith's absence during the High Republic era also allowed the Jedi to flourish, free from the pervasive influence of the dark side. The contrast between the Jedi councils of these two eras highlights the difference in their respective orders. The High Republic Jedi Council functioned as a collective of wise and compassionate leaders who valued dialogue and consensus. Their deliberations were guided by a shared commitment to the Force and the greater good, rather than by political pressures or external agendas. The Clone Wars-era council, however, operated under a constant sense of urgency, their decisions often shaped by the immediate demands of the war. This shift from contemplation to reaction exemplifies the larger transformation of the Jedi Order during this time. The Jedi's role as mentors and teachers also evolved between these two eras. In the High Republic, Jedi Masters embraced a holistic approach to training, encouraging their students to explore their unique talents and connections to the Force. Padawans were given the freedom to develop their identities within the framework of the Jedi Code, resulting in a generation of Jedi who were deeply confident in their abilities and purpose. In the Clone Wars era, however, the training of Padawans was often rushed due to the demands of the war. The emphasis on battlefield readiness left little room for the philosophical and spiritual growth that once defined Jedi training. This shift contributed to a generation of Jedi who were ill-prepared to navigate the moral complexities of the war, further weakening the Order. Despite these contrasts, there are threads of continuity that connect the Jedi of the High Republic and the Clone Wars eras. Both groups shared a commitment to the ideals of peace and justice, even as their methods and circumstances diverged. The Jedi of the Clone Wars, for all their compromises, remained guided by a desire to protect the galaxy and uphold the principles of the Jedi Code. Their struggles and ultimate downfall serve as a tragic reminder of how external pressures can erode even the noblest of institutions. The High Republic Jedi, with their focus on exploration, diplomacy, and spiritual growth, represent an aspirational vision of the Order at its best. They stand as a testament to the potential of the Jedi to serve as true guardians of peace and harmony. The Clone Wars era Jedi, by contrast, illustrate the challenges of maintaining these ideals in the face of adversity and corruption. Together, these two eras provide a nuanced and multifaceted portrait of the Jedi Order, highlighting both its strengths and its vulnerabilities. The evolution of the Jedi across these periods is a reflection of the galaxy itself. The High Republic's optimism and unity allowed the Jedi to thrive as spiritual and moral leaders, while the Clone Wars' chaos and conflict forced them into roles that compromised their principles. By examining these two eras, we gain a deeper understanding of the Jedi's role in the Star Wars narrative and the enduring themes of hope, balance, and the struggle against darkness.